All right, why don't we go ahead and kick off? It's 3 minutes after. We'll have people joining us along the way, but we can start with some introductions here. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining our webinar today. The title, Quantum Computers Pose a Huge Threat to Current Encryption, and Get Ready. So my name is Skip Sanzeri. I'm co-founder and COO of Qusecure, and I'll be your host for today. As we get started, I want to let you know that we'll have a question and answer session. So at the end, in Zoom, there's a Q&A box where you can enter questions, and I would ask if you do have questions, please enter them anytime during the webinar, and we'll batch those up and start answering them as quickly as we can when we hit the Q&A session. The other thing is we're recording this, so we're going to send out the recording to all of the attendees and the folks that didn't make it. So if you wanted to screenshot or take notes, you're welcome to, but we'll be happy to give you the recording as well. Moving into sort of how we got here. So we started our journey about 3 years ago, and the first event we had really in sort of determining if there was an interest in the market out there for post-quantum cybersecurity was at Wilson Sonsini out here in Palo Alto in 2018. And we decided to put on an event that was post-quantum cybersecurity and the threats, and kind of a predecessor to where we are now. And we wanted to see what the turnout would be and what kind of folks would show up. And we ended up with about 150 people there, all very, very interested in what we were talking about. And we were sort of deciding at that point that this is something that we want to work on. And we decided to launch the company shortly thereafter. The idea was that we saw these threats out there, we saw what NIST was doing, and we felt that at this point, there are some real reasons why you want to consider post-quantum cybersecurity now. The biggest one that Dave will cover is harvesting, and that's where data is stolen, databases are taken, and the consensus, I think, is, and I'm not going to make this scientific, but I think there is some consensus that within 10 years, we'll have quantum computers that are strong enough to break our current encryption. Maybe sooner, if you ask some people. But that means the data stolen today, if it has a life cycle, or if the value is necessary for 25 or even 50 years, sometimes in military grade stuff, 75 years, that means that it's going to be exposed for that period of time. And so in essence, as we talk with some of our folks at the DoD, they're telling us it's already too late. So I think what we're going to cover today for everybody is a little bit about quantum computing to give you some background. Dave's going to cover that. Then he'll go into really the threat and why we need to work on this today. And then finally, he'll cover some solutions. And then we're also going to introduce Q-Force, which is a community that we helped launch, but it's independent. Designed to do penetration testing, and it has task forces around quantum risk. And that's something we're going to welcome everybody to join. It's an open source community, and we expect to have a lot of projects. We want to get to 1,000 community members by year end. So now moving ahead, I'd like to introduce Dave Crothmer. Dave and I met at the Band of Angels 3 years ago when we were working on an AI company, and I brought the AI company up there to the band, got to meet Dave. We became friends and started this quantum journey together along with Costa and Becca, and really began to push this post-quantum cybersecurity envelope. We see it as the largest upgrade cycle in computer history that's coming at us with what's happening out there, and from the threat vectors and from the compliance like NIST that we're seeing. We see this as a big deal that we should all pay attention to. So Dave, I would like to hand it over to you. Dave Crothmer, founder and CEO of Qusecure. Dave, take it away.
Dave, you're muted.
Yeah, Dave, we can't hear you.
There you go. So guys, thank you, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dave Crothmer. I'm the CEO of Qusecure. And we're going to have a little journey this afternoon, a 35-minute journey around security, around quantum computing, around the whole space. So again, thank you for joining us. So cryptography is the mathematics and the algorithms we use to protect devices in an electronic network. And cryptography has largely remained unchanged for some 20 plus years. With our cryptographic solutions, it's like we've handed out a size 9 shoe to everyone, and we're like, please wear it. And it's been a bit of a boring field per se. A lot of security is focused on the network, which is great, but we're going to focus on cryptography because cryptography is rapidly becoming really, really interesting. So the problem with our current forms of cryptography is they're really chatty and they're vulnerable to these emerging threats like quantum computers, and they're really unable to adapt. So right now, when you have cryptography or security on your phone, it literally remains unchanged no matter what happens with the attack. The second piece of it is that, protecting our networks just really isn't enough. We're responsible for data for upwards of 75 years. So if that data slips out of your network to a foreign nation state or something, you're still responsible for it. And the current way our data is encrypted, if it sits on a server somewhere else, they're going to poke away at it and crack it. And if it has PII, that's really problematic. So, so our current cryptography just doesn't protect you from these kinds of emerging threats. And there's unique targets right now. So if you're in government or banking, finance, space, cloud infrastructure or infrastructure in general, energy, you're an app provider, if you have any form of PII, that you're being attacked and your data is likely being taken. So we're gonna back up and have a little fun discussion about quantum itself. I'm gonna take you down a little history lesson. So some 2,500 years ago, there was a guy named Democritus, and he did not invent democracy, but he popularized this concept that the most basic unit of measure was an atom. Brilliant kind of conclusion, brilliant observation, except he was followed shortly thereafter by a gentleman named Plato. And Plato hated this idea because Plato believed that matter was made out of forms, and he had everything, this concept of the atom, squashed for somewhere in addition to 2,000 years. And in 1905, this young scientist pours some bee pollen in a bowl and measures the atom, and the atom becomes reality. And that young scientist was Einstein. So in the quantum world, and when we say the quantum world, we mean an atom or something smaller. Quantum particles lie beneath the atom. There's this phenomenon. There's really only two really unique phenomenon. The first is called superposition. And it's the ability of a quantum system to be in multiple states at once. So this particle can be here, it can be in another universe, it can be across the universe, but it's a strange phenomenon in the really small that when we experience a particle or thing, it's fixed, but in the quantum world, it's not. It can be here, there, or anywhere. The second kind of unique characteristic of quantum mechanics is this thing called entanglement. And that means I can connect these two particles together over across the room or across the universe. So these are really fascinating concepts. And at its simplest level, we have a quantum particle, which is an atom or smaller, and we can connect them with other quantum particles. So a little joke, because in the quantum world, a particle can be in any state. So to bring it back home to your project, so how's your quantum computer project prototype coming along? The programmer says, great. The project simultaneously exists in a state of both being totally successful and not yet started. Can you observe it? That's a tricky question. So things in the quantum world can live in different states. Let's tie this around to actual computing. So we're all familiar with regular computers, a regular processor. And a regular processor uses bits, ones and zeros, ties them together, generally into a word. And generally that word size is like 64 bits, which is 8 bytes or 8 letters. So computers process this data really, really quickly, but it's a really small word size. So it's great for solving linear problems, but there's a whole universe of problems out there that are not linear, that have many, many variables. So let's enter a quantum computer. And remember, we talked about superposition and entanglement. So with a quantum computer, we take these particles or atoms or subatomic particles that can be in many states at one time, and we link them together with entanglement, and we can create a quantum circuit. So the beauty of that quantum circuit is, say with Google's bristlecone, the word size is now 2 to the 73rd. So 73 qubits, 2 to the 73rd, which is equivalent to a yotta bit of data, which is equivalent to all the data stored in the world in the last year, which is a lot of data in one instruction. So instead of having 8 bytes, you've got all the data stored in the world in the last year in one instruction. So when you're solving these really complex multivariable problems, it brings up a huge advantage. So, and just as an adder, there are a lot of quantum mechanical processes. Like one thing they noticed about photosynthesis is that it always took the optimum route to convert light into energy. And they realized it did that because it took every route at once, a quantum process, and then fixed on the ideal path. So we've been working on, Richard Feynman popularized this concept of quantum computers probably 50 years ago. And he said, if you want to solve problems in nature, you've got to use quantum. So there's been a long stretch of time where a lot of research trying to tame these atoms and subatomic particles. But part of the problem is they're really susceptible to noise. We have the math to figure out where they're going to be when they come out of superposition, but a lot of noise. And it seems like within the last year, we've really started to attack the noise problem. And a lot of significant accomplishments in quantum computers, and pretty much everyone's working on them. And the trajectory we're on is to have scale quantum computing, by 2025. And by scale, I mean 1 million quantum bits, which is a huge improvement over where we've been. So there's a lot of excitement now around the trajectory around quantum computers, which are great, but as we're going to review, they have a lot of challenges when it relates to security. So quantum computers for those multivariable problems, like a neural net, can add significant power. If you take your brain, you have about 1 trillion neurons. I might have less, you might have more. But if you try and traverse such a complicated neural net linearly, you're not going to be able to do it. So quantum computers, theoretically, with artificial intelligence, can span these complex data structures really quickly. So the big apps we're going to go into are like chemistry and these areas where like I'm trying to model a molecule or a pharma product and they have immense variables, and big data. And the other interesting thing about quantum is it takes approximately 1,000 times less power than conventional computers to solve the same problem. Here are some of the big use cases. We're going to go into encryption and cybersecurity, but in financial modeling, like if you're modeling an economy, there's a lot of variables, right? So quantum will be a huge benefit to financial markets with data analysis. Understanding the context of data at any one moment is very complex linearly, because if I have a huge store of data, I have to pull a piece of data, put it in a bucket, pull another piece of data, compare it, change it. The promise of quantum computing is that I'll be able to understand the whole data set simultaneously and analyze it. Drug research and development, there are molecules that are like 2.6 million electrons. And understanding how to model that, quantum computers will really lend itself in the supply chain. So we're going to go into the quantum threat on security. So, quantum computers are going to be amazing for advancing these technologies, but the bulk of all our cryptography is based on factoring, and which conventional computers really can't do, but quantum computers are really good at. The Defense Department released their last bill on the 31st, and they said that all groups within the Defense Department must prepare for this. It is an imminent threat. We're going to go into why it's an imminent threat. But there's just probably in the last 6 months or a year, there's been a huge realization that this is really a threat. It's a threat to the blockchain. It's a threat to any data you have. It's a threat to any data in transit you might have. We're going to dig into it a little bit. So we're going to go through cryptography really quickly. And so these threats, so there are 2 different categories of cryptography. One is called asymmetric, the other is called symmetric. The asymmetric cryptography you might have heard of is like RSA or elliptic curve, ECC, and they have a key length. And so factoring these keys really wasn't possible with conventional computers. But with quantum computers, there is an algorithm called Shor's algorithm, which can take the key strength, the key length, and reduce it to 0. So the threat is with Shor's and enough qubits, you can take the bulk of our cryptography and render it useless. And if you think about that for a second, if you think that some foreign actor or some bad actor could just break right into your devices and right into your data, that's the promise of quantum computing. The second form is symmetric or AES, and quantum computers can reduce that key size in half. And the capacity of these quantum computers growing really, really quickly. I'm going to give you a little dinner party conversation. So next time you're at a dinner party and your friend asks you how many qubits you need to crack RSA, you just tell them, hey, it's 2 times the key length plus 3. So 2048, RSA 2048 times 2 plus 3 is about 4,100 qubits to render RSA 2048 to 0. And I definitely use that line. I think you'll gain some good press. At Qusecure, we have a partnership with Amazon, Harrisburg University, working on actually improving on that. So right now it's 2n, 2 times the key length plus 3 via Shor's. We're actually working on a whole slew of technologies with Amazon and the University of Harrisburg to figure out if we can reduce that. We want to be the people who figure it out first. And this is a really important piece of work. So where we've heard tales about reducing Shor's or optimizing Shor's, but we're going to be developing that capability with Amazon. So we can be in front of that curve. Because you could imagine if you could reduce Shor's, you're going to get to this intersection of the qubits I need to render security worthless. And we've got a really active program on many different hardware devices and simulators to optimize Shor's. So when we talk about quantum security, there are actually 3 forms of quantum security. The farthest out, and one I think super interesting, but way down the road, is called quantum teleportation. And quantum teleportation is how it sounds. It's the same technology that Scotty used to beam Captain Kirk up to the Enterprise. And that is, in entanglement, I can connect 2 particles together. But if I introduce a third particle at the beginning, it changes the particle at the end to that particle I introduced. That's called teleportation. So the interesting thing is, theoretically, I could communicate with these bits across the room or across the universe. That's quantum teleportation, sometimes referred to as the distant quantum internet. So great for communication theoretically, and down the road, maybe after our lifetime, you'll be able to actually teleport a person because it's the same technology. The only downside to teleporting a person is it actually only makes a copy of them. So you'd be stuck with actually 2 people. So you'd have to figure out what to do with the original copy or the copy you're transporting. The area we're working in is called post-quantum cryptography. I'm not sure why it's called post-quantum, but it's the algorithmic solution to quantum security. There's a lot of investment in hardware, but I was a CIO in a past life and realized that companies don't want to upgrade their systems. They don't want to have a wholesale upgrade of hardware. So we're going to go into the solution, but the National Standards Board has been working on this for a long time, reduce these algorithm sets down to a smaller group. And in essence, let's say if conventional cryptography, I'll use an example where I walk up to Windsor Castle, I want to have tea with the Queen. There's 1 Swiss guard, I punch him in the face, knock him over, have tea with the Queen. With post-quantum cryptography, these are 400-dimension mathematical structures. So it's like filling every inch of that castle with Swiss guards. So I go punch the first one, second one punches me, I punch them, I'm not getting in. So post-quantum cryptography is a really amazing solution to take the networks we have today and make them ready for this coming quantum threat. So preparing for the post-quantum world. We have two types of data in essence. We have data in motion and data at rest. We've talked a little bit about the vulnerabilities of data at rest. I think there was an article out that one of our foreign adversaries, they've been mining encrypted data for a long, long time. And the likelihood that your chats or your texts are sitting on a server waiting to be decrypted is very, very high, including your databases. So this data is being mined and it's sitting in unfriendly places. So as I mentioned, we don't just need to protect our networks. We need to protect the data for up to 75 years. If you're in the military, it's 75 years. If you're in banking, it's 50. If you have personal identifiable information. So we've got to look beyond protecting the data we have in transit. So there's a couple dimensions to that process of protecting your data. The first is to discover. I mean, you have to understand what devices you have on your network, where your vulnerabilities are. And this discovery process is really important because in many instances, we really don't even know what we have out there. We can have IoT devices or devices on our network that are vulnerable, that are vectors for bad actors to get into our network. And that's a bad thing. So the first step in the process is discover. That's our first step as a company, is to discover the operating network. The second is to protect, and we're going to go into that in a little detail, and that's to distribute this post-quantum cryptography, and we'll go into it but the third is really important. So when we talk about cryptography, I mentioned that, you know, our process, our methodology historically has been like one size fits all. So I give you that size 9 shoe. If you're a size 11, you're going to have to make it work. But cryptography has not been adaptive. So when I'm being attacked by some bad actor, the device doesn't have the ability to respond to that attack innately. So it's really critical that the technology be able to adapt to the incoming threats. And so this kind of smart cryptography or smart devices will be really important in the future. So this device can protect itself. It doesn't have to be in the circumstance where it's just getting pummeled. And then the fourth is just the monitor process. Is we really have to understand you know, where our threats are and how they're behaving at any one moment. This is kind of the broader journey into preparing your networks. This is what Qusecure does. So just a little picture of the network. So you know, in the network we have many devices. We have servers, routers, firewalls. In this case, you know, we've got satellites in space, IoT devices, could be your TV. You know, everything is electronic right now. And we're generating huge amounts of data, and everything's got some form of cryptography supporting it. So the first step is to orchestrate this cryptography, this new form of cryptography throughout the network. Some of the challenges with that is currently it's really slow and vulnerable. I mean, again, our networks were based on some 50-year-old technologies like public key infrastructure. They're very creaky, and you know, we spend a lot of money on security. We're going to spend a lot more, but at its best right now, we're just plugging the dike. We're just sticking our finger into the dike because the infrastructure and the architecture of the internet is very prone to attacks, very prone to side channel attacks. You guys have heard about SolarWinds that turned out to be a certificate attack. And so a lot of vulnerabilities in the network. So, you know, the way you orchestrate this is you've got to get post-quantum cryptography with this adaptive cryptography to all endpoints. And we do it in software because our thesis is that the hardware solution is really not scalable. So it's for any system, anywhere. You're only as good as the weakest segment in your network. So you guys have seen these attacks like Target. They came in through an HVAC partner. So you've got to get these forms of defense to every node in your network that might be vulnerable. And like I said, there's really primary targets right now. Banking is a huge target, DoD, the energy grid, cloud providers, because when these quantum computers reach full power, everybody should be worried. Everybody should be worried, and you should be worried now. Here's a little banking example. So one of the key elements of post-quantum or a quantum solution. So when we talk about the post-quantum solution, it's like wrapping your data in a diamond cell. That's post-quantum. But the basis for that, that data transmission encapsulation is, it starts with a key. And right now we use pseudo random numbers for those keys. So we have chips and they generate what they think are random numbers. The problem is they're not really random, they're programmatic. And so you can use AI. There's a whole series of ways to actually figure out what that randomness is. It's actually not that random. So at the core of the solution for any quantum is what they call quantum random number generators. And so a quantum random number generator is actually like a little quantum computer, but we don't need to keep it cool or freeze it. We just let those quantum bits disintegrate and we measure them, and they generate an actual true quantum number. So that number is undecodable, and it's called true randomness. So we take that, we encapsulate it in these post-quantum cells, and then we transmit and decode and encode on the other end. So you could see, I think MasterCard came out with a post-quantum credit card. It's a perfect application, right? Because now I scan my credit card, the data uses true random numbers, and it's encapsulated in this diamond-like structure. And so for banking, really strong use case. Cloud to cloud, there's a lot of vulnerabilities because, as you know, we architect, I was a former CIO, as we architect our networks, a lot of times we have Google and AWS, we have our own clouds. And these segments between are areas where bad actors really like to enter your network on a vulnerable channel, cloud to cloud. So the post-quantum architecture secures those channels with these post-quantum encryption. Cloud to cloud, really strong and important use case. At Qusecure, we deploy primarily on AWS, and we are in a secured cloud the whole way, from quantum random number generator all the way to that 5G tower. So can't break in, can't get involved, can't do anything. Data at rest, we talked about. So right now, our data is encrypted, and there's a likelihood a lot of it is stolen. Because, you know, when people break into your network, they don't tell you, hey, I broke into your network, I stole your data. If you have PII, it's sitting on a server somewhere. If they can crack it right now, they sell it on the dark web, they sell it. But the likelihood is, you know, people have been harvesting your data for a long time, and they will continue to do that. And they're sitting on servers with bad actors. And so if you post-quantum encapsulate the data at rest, meaning you use these quantum random number generated seeds and post-quantum shell around it, then if they steal it, you know, you buy yourself a lot of time. You'll buy yourself 50 years or some equivalent of. So I would encourage everyone to think about their data. And you know, the interesting thing is we think of data in use a lot, but we have a lot of backup data, and that's generally the data that's stolen. So having data in an unpost-quantum encrypted form right now just exposes a lot of vulnerability. And it seems like we all have some form of personal identifiable information, PII, in our networks. And we've got to be really careful. Let's talk a little bit about the market. So, you know, President Biden came out, I don't know, 2 months ago and said as a cornerstone of his presidency, he's going to allocate $300 billion to quantum and AI. And in the last infrastructure bill, he's allocated $180 billion to quantum technologies. This is a huge increase in spending. And I think Kamala Harris actually sponsored one of the quantum bills early on. And remember, the hacker economy is $10.5 trillion. So, you know, they're stealing a lot more than we're spending to protect ourselves. But we're quickly, at least at a governmental level, gaining a deep understanding of the challenge and responding to it. So this field is going to grow really rapidly. We're friends with Jack Hydery at Google X, who said he believes it's going to be the largest technology upgrade in history, multi-trillion-dollar upgrade, just rethinking our networks so they are prepared for this coming threat. And you know, NIST is racing towards the base standard, and it was going to be out in 2024. Now it's looking more like 2022. So there will be a big push and a big jump towards upgrading everybody's network. Just wanted to kind of walk you through the team a little. You know, I've built a number of companies, and I don't think I've ever been as proud of a team as this team. So I came out of industry. I was a CIO and built a company that went on to become Oracle's largest cloud partner. Costa, just renowned CISO. Skip is author of the Quantum Design Sprint. Rebecca, Forbes 30 and 30 in quantum. She's named to the World Economic Forum Quantum Futures Board, Stanford AI. Barry Van Houser is our VP of engineering. He's also a JD, a lawyer, and a computer scientist. He's done fundamental work in space cryptography. Frank Konizny, who was the former CTO of the Air Force and the CIO, CTO of AT&T Government Systems. And Louis Gasparini, who's a former CTO of RSA. Domenico Demola, who is the VP of platforms at Juniper, and Sarah McCarty, who's just probably one of the top 5 people in post-quantum cryptography in the world. So great team. I look forward to your questions. I'm going to hand it over to Jim, and Jim's going to talk to you about Qforce.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So how do you guys get involved? We created this Qforce community to really be the world's leading community for post-quantum cryptography and white hat hacking. So a lot of these threats are emergent. We're looking to get involved in projects to disclose these threats from a defensive perspective, as well as build task forces around different initiatives such as standards in cryptography and post-quantum cryptography, as well as education task force to message and communicate to CIOs and industry leaders how do we deploy these post-quantum infrastructures as mentioned in this presentation. We'd love to get any of you guys here involved in the community. We have at qforce.org. This is intended to be a neutral community. It's not really affiliated with any one company, and although Qforce is kind of sponsored by Qusecure, it's sponsored by many other organizations, and it's rapidly growing. We also got a lot of different task force already set up. So if you're interested, you can reach out to me. My email's on the in the chat here, and I'll post it again right now. And I think there's a few other slides we'll get through.
And hey, Jim, I don't know if you saw, but there's a couple people in the chat that are saying that the Slack link is not working.
Oh, oops. Okay, well, I'll fix that right now. Sorry about that. I think 1 second. So yeah, 1 minute. So I'll give you guys the Slack link. Apologize. I'll fix that while we're talking. It must have been an upgrade of the website today when we fixed the logo. Regardless, we are really excited to chat with you guys and connect. This is one of our virtual meetings. We will have many other meetings like this, where we'll do educational events and seminars. We also will have a lot of different ideation sessions in our different task forces, be it education task force or our standards task force. And we'll definitely have a lot of projects where you can come in and play around with quantum computers, build new algorithms, maybe be involved in the community at large, and have some demo projects. We want to make this an inviting community for everyone. And yeah, we'll definitely get you involved in So send us your ideas and we'll definitely get you involved. Next slide. So the next sort of quick thing to hit is we have different roles in the Q-Force. General members are anyone who signs up to Slack. And basically anyone who wants to just be involved, sign up for Slack can do so as a general member. If you want to be more involved, you can get involved as a fellow, mentor, advisor, or a director. Fellows kind of get involved with projects in the task forces. Mentors are subject matter experts that are kind of helping fellows complete projects. They might be an industry leader in quantum, post-quantum cryptography to help you accomplish the goals of your projects. We also have a series of industry advisors. We have about 10 to 15 advisors internally already that have set a strategic plan that you can read on the website. And regardless, you can also be involved as a director and lead up a task force. So if you have new ideas for a task force, we're always open. As I mentioned, we have 2 task forces, the education task force and the standards task force. But if you have any other ideas for new task forces, we're always open for you to lead that up. So please let us know. And I think that's pretty much it. We're really excited, guys, here to engage you. We have, I think about, I'd say 50 to 100 users already engaged in this. We're hoping to get to around 1,000 general users before in a year, have 3 to 4 task forces live. We already have 2, get a few more directors and mentors and fellows involved. And would love to engage you in this community and super excited for you to be here. So I'll update the website with links. Sorry again for any trouble that you might have had during this.
One thing I want to say, just to add to Jim, like I grew up in a very nerdy family, and a jet propulsion Caltech family, very nerdy family, and I always had a fascination for physics, although I got a computer science degree and I was largely in sales. But this community, the quantum community, the work is just fascinating, and the people are really fascinating. Like everyone in this community right now, it's in its infancy. Everyone wants to help each other. Everyone's just brilliant, and you can be having a conversation about security and the multiverse in the same conversation. So if you have a little kind of sciencey scientist in you, mad scientist, the community is just phenomenal. The people are really, really phenomenal, and just the work is really, really cutting edge. And the task force is a great way to get involved. We're working with Amazon. We're working with a bunch of companies to help set the stage, for quantum security and set the standards. One of our first groups is education, because one of the big challenges in quantum is helping people understand why it's important and why now. And so we're really focusing on education, but we're also focusing on quantum hacking, some legit quantum hacking. I'd encourage you to join, and this community around quantum is just a phenomenal community. So having said that, we have a number of questions in the Q&A. If you have anything to add on, please do, but we'll go through those.
Yep, I got that, Dave. Thank you. Yeah, Q&A is open, so feel free to add to that. So Costa, we got a question coming up for you here. How is blockchain impacted by quantum computing?
And unmute. Great. So yes, there are some well-known vulnerabilities within the blockchain as it relates to quantum computing. There are some windows within the blockchain structure that allow an attacker to circumvent the code and to actually inject their own work within the proof of concept, proof of work framework within it. And it is believed that about a quarter of the current Bitcoin infrastructure could be vulnerable to quantum attacks because of those vulnerabilities. Now, it's not limited to just Bitcoin. It is a problem across the board.
Thank you, Costa. I have another question here, Costa, I think you can answer as well, from Brent. And he's talking about the entertainment industry. And he is saying that a lot of folks in entertainment don't worry about security or a lack thereof because they think movies being decrypted or stolen is a low risk. And he said he's had conversations about that. And so he says, is there a sense of encryption that's not much of an issue here in entertainment, or should they be worried, Costa?
Yeah, Brent, I'm glad that you asked this question because it's risk is one of those things where you've got to look at the longevity of the data, and it affects the movie industry and the entertainment industry in general, as much as it affects the financial services, because the movies themselves, actually the artistic products, I should say, within the entertainment industry carry their own value. So we don't want them getting stolen. We don't want them leaking. I know that within the gaming industry, they even have air gap networks specifically for their development processes. So the cryptography based on how we store data, how we protect it, is actually indeed vulnerable, irrespective of the industry, and it affects the entertainment industry the same. The current cryptography, when the data is stored, is can be affected based on crypto analysis, where they figure out what random number generation was used to encode. They can attack the data as it's stolen and moved out to the attacker's equipment, so that they can sit there and continue to hammer away at it until they break it. And of course, as the entertainment files or movie files or audio files are moved around in the industries, they're protected by protocols that are already obsolete. So capturing that data in transit really opens up a whole slew of attacks against it, because by breaking public key cryptography, attackers can very easily get at the keys themselves that protect the data that was used to that was protected with those keys.
Thank you, Costa. Now this one I'll put out to the team because this is moving into quantum hardware and power requirements. So Larry Friedberg, my good friend, hello Larry, has a two-part question. The first is on how much electrical power is required to enable quantum computing. And then he has a second question that I'll ask in a minute on the financial system and how that works with quantum. So any of our panelists care to answer how much electrical power is required to enable quantum computing?
It depends, doesn't it? It depends on what kind of a quantum computer you're using. So I'll talk about the ones that we use. They use up pretty much the same as any other 1U server from Dell or HP or IBM would use up. So we use that for quantum random number generation. And but I know that there are some photonics companies that have the same power usage and footprint as we do. And I'll leave the general power usage for general purpose or machines for one of my colleagues to answer.
Hey guys, hey Skip, really quick, you pointed out a while back, I think the IBM Sierra, their largest box is like 2 tennis courts, uses, you had a little.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I think Larry, one way to look at it is, you may remember back in 2019, or for those that are on the call, that Google claimed quantum supremacy by doing a calculation in less than 3 minutes that would have taken over 10,000 years or more on a supercomputer, and they measured it against IBM's supercomputer at Oak Ridge National Labs. So I would say quantum computers take their fair share of energy. However, when you think about the level of calculation that happened with a single quantum computer to do a 3-minute calculation that would take 10,000 years on the supercomputer that takes, I think, 4,000 gallons of water per minute to cool. I think your efficiencies are just fine with quantum. They're, just due to as they were able to entangle so many qubits and do a calculation of that size, it really doesn't even rate against. I mean, quantum computers are just superior in energy usage due to their power. Larry's second question, now this is in the financial services area. So he says our financial system is built on the interchange. Security applications lie atop the interchange to protect PII. By what he's hearing, linear nature of digital security will surrender quickly to bad guys with quantum capabilities. Will the interchange need to be rebuilt via quantum computing technology, or does the overlay layer need to be rebuilt, or both?
Yeah, can I dig into that, Skip?
Yeah, absolutely. Grab it.
So guys, Larry, great question. Our whole financial system, you can imagine if our financial system is vulnerable, right? If your bank accounts are vulnerable, if these transactions they flow are vulnerable. So one could imagine that we have to upgrade the whole network, the hardware and the whole network, which is a nightmare scenario because a lot of the capability we talked about QKD, there's still significant limitations, but our solution is all in software. So what we can do is inject ourselves via software in that network, and all we have to do is talk to those nodes in the network for financial and upgrade the security in those nodes. So our thesis is that the solution for this problem is to use a post-quantum orchestration platform like Qusecure's to overlay the software elements into those nodes, and thereby making your financial interchange post-quantum resilient without having to upgrade hardware devices. It's going to be a long time before the actual devices are quantum ready. And then a lot of improvements in technology. There are still a lot of limitations in hardware solutions like QKD, very promising, but in terms of a global rollout, a scalable global rollout, this problem is going to be solved in software first. Well, maybe not solved, but it's going to largely be addressed in software first. And in that case, you use the orchestration platform to upgrade the capabilities of each node in that network so they are post-quantum secure, post-quantum resilient.
Thanks, Dave. Jim, this is for you. Joe asks, do you accept companies from France at Qforce?
Yeah, so it's a global community. Right now it's open to anyone to sign up. And would love to get your thoughts about forming a community in your location. There are quite a few international folks that have been joining the group. So yeah, feel free to reach out and we can do a meeting and talk through that. Love to.
Yeah, because there are very active communities in France and England and just throughout the world in the quantum space. France specifically, there's a lot of intellectual thought leadership coming out of France. And this whole discussion is about really smart people. So we're really excited about having everyone's involvement. And this is truly a global opportunity. And we see it that way.
I have a few more questions here that came in. So this one's on satellites. So Barry, if you want to unmute, the question is, you discussed satellites and protecting satellites. Can you give us some more insight on how that might be done?
Sure. So the current satellite situation is such that they're using old legacy type of proprietary protocols or just older systems up there. So what the Qusecure aspect does is that we will go into be able to do a in-flight update of their system, i.e. again through software, and they'll be able to enhance their security components within these updates that communicate across down to base stations and to satellite through this system. So currently other aspects that Qusecure is doing is we're getting in partnerships with other companies that will have the entire QRNG scenario for post-quantum computing flying up in space already. So that'll be a local system versus anything on the ground. And that will protect the communications via whether it's laser or it's the UHF or any form of communication band that they want to use, utilizing our algorithms and our symmetric quantum keys.
Yeah, it's a really exciting use case. We're going to be protecting data centers in space. And just a little side note, China has committed like 18 months ago to have all their government and military infrastructure fully quantum safe within 18 months. And all their satellites, they say, are quantum resilient. So the US is the largest users of satellites in the world. And we've got a lot of work to do to prepare for this. And we're behind. We are markedly behind the race right now.
Right. And I would add to that as well, because I think the satellite infrastructure is very important. You know, in China, they're using QKD for a lot of their infrastructure support and security. And the solutions that we're proposing are softer. And as Barry said, you know, if you're going to use QKD, then you're really looking at the next generation of satellites that are going up, because you can't really move QKD up into the existing satellite infrastructure. But we're using software that we can send up to those satellites to protect the existing birds that are up there now. And so it's a very fast way to get that deployed, which is interesting. This one's for Becca. Becca, how does AI play a role in post-quantum cybersecurity?
Great question. How does AI play a role? So a lot of the AI that is in our pipeline and that we've worked on is classical in nature. But that really comes in network analysis, threat analysis, and detection, etc.
Thank you, Becca. Nikos has a question here. Is the software you're designing hardware agnostic? And Dave, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, so our software runs on a protected server. It is hardware agnostic, and we can inject it behind your firewall in your network. We serve it up all in the cloud. So yeah, we believe that the flexibility use case here is really important. There was another question about telcos and how they might adopt this technology. So in the same way you'd adopt it in enterprise, we would orchestrate this post-quantum cryptography, whether it's a 5G tower or a cell phone. We'd orchestrate it throughout the network. And so, yes, it's hardware agnostic. We can integrate with other forms of QKD or QRNG, but our solution is a wrap solution. We provide everything, and then we can integrate with other solutions.
Another question that came in chat here. This is Costa and Becca. How will post-quantum security affect machine learning privacy techniques, such as differential privacy, federated learning, et cetera?
Becca, you want to take that one first, or should I? You're muted.
If you got a good answer, go ahead, Costa.
Sure. So this is where it gets really really interesting and really complex as well, because the machine learning that's currently being used both on the on the attacking side and on the defenses within the industry, it plays a very interesting role where it looks at certain behavioral aspects for the most part, and in some cases it looks at digital signatures, but in most cases it's focused around behavioral and how to mitigate that. So some of the questions that we've looked at is how do we speed up that process within on the defensive side? Because what's interesting about quantum computing and how it's offloaded to machine learning is that in classical computing, the way we use machine learning, it's still a linear process. It's based on a bunch of instruction sets that go out, grab it, and essentially create a linear process. What we do is we try to parallelize that linear process to make it more efficient. By offloading the nonlinear processing to machine learning and quantum tensor flows and other methods, we can actually distribute the machine learning loads that we use on the defensive side of things, and speed up that process in general. So part of it will be offloaded to quantum machine that relies on global minimums, and part of it will be on linear progression based on how you would do it, how you would typically tackle it as a process. That's probably the easiest way I can describe it right now. Becca, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, sure. I would say specifically in terms of differential privacy and federated learning, it's going to be handled in much the same way as it is with today's cryptography. Just we have the different algorithms. So there's not much of a difference there.
Yeah, but let me give you a practical application that Becca's team has developed, and that's understanding the impact of a new threat on a larger system of threats. So conventional computers really struggle with understanding the state of a system when you introduce a new variable into it. So quantum computers or quantum circuits are really good at understanding the change that is impacted by a new threat on the larger system. And Rebecca's team has developed some capability in that area.
Here we have another question. I'll just take this one myself. The question is, who do we predict will be the largest actors of quantum black hat hacking? So, and this is from Michael. So Michael, I think the answer to that is that, in quantum, it's very, very difficult. This hardware is extremely difficult to build. And, you've got the biggest companies in the world working on it, whether it's IBM or Google or Microsoft, Amazon, Alibaba. The first effort is going to come from the folks that have the capability to build quantum computers of strength. And that means it's going to be a nation state. So this won't be some teenagers in a basement at midnight. This is going to be a nation state. And then you have to look at where are most of the hacks coming from these days, and then you can probably get the combination. So certainly China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. I think they all have quantum capabilities. China has obviously really put a lot of money to their quantum programs. So we would expect nation states to be the first, and then within 5 to 10 years, quantum will become more prevalent, and as people will be able to buy powerful quantum computers, then I think it spreads out even further. But nonetheless, when we do know that these first computers come online, or I may even restate that, we probably won't know when they come online, and data will just start disappearing because, as Dave said earlier, harvesting is one of the big issues. So they'll be able to take all the data that they've harvested and decrypt all of it with a powerful quantum computer. It'll just sit there until they're ready, and then they can start looking at other things like breaking some of the network encryption and breaking some into the data in transit as well. And so that's why we have to prepare now. And I would, say enterprises, government, have to start looking at strategies around this today. And we know that a lot of that's happening because we're working with the DoD in a number of areas. We're working with a lot of large enterprises to do the same. So we're seeing this as something that really needs to move quickly here. Another one is, Costa, I think this is for you. It disappeared, but it said,
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's my fault that I made it disappear. What I responded to that one in text by saying that we're using all of the PQ round 3 finalists with special focus on the front runners, and whom we believe will be the front runners based on not only ours but external analysis, and just looking at their performance numbers. We actually work with NIST on as part of NCCME on developing these common standards. So we've got a very good lead on what's going on. We do use other libraries as well, so that we can support both classical and post-quantum. But we focus primarily on whom we believe the front runners to be.
Yep. And so the question is, what NIST algorithms is our post-quantum encryption based on? So again, as Costa said, we're working with, we're prepared to work with all of the finalists. So we're building to all of them. So it won't matter. We expect that there'll be multiple winners anyway. So, well, we are at the mark here at, we're a little bit after 3 p.m. Pacific. So we want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will have more of these webinars in specific areas like space, banking, other industries, et cetera. We'll be inviting you back, and we really appreciate the fact that you made it here today. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing all of you again. We'll have the recordings available, and we'll reach out to everybody within the next few days. Thanks so much.
Thanks, team.
Thanks, everybody.